throw, fire, and down! Incomplete, down at the goal line by San Diego! Tomlinson, off the left side, Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. I think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game.
Welcome, everybody, to the last preseason show. Preseason is over. The season is upon us. So rather than reviewing this whole game that happened today, we're going straight into 53s, who we think individually make the final 53 for the Chargers, at least the initial 53, as they go into week one. So Craig's got his, Jamie's got his, I've got mine. We'll kind of talk about some things that happened in this game as we're starting to break down these position groups, but we're going to go position group by position group. We'll go special teams, offense, defense. We're then going to talk about our bubble guys. So like the two guys that made our last two 53 spots, and then the two guys that didn't make the cut and ended up falling off our 53-man rosters. And then we'll give you our complete 53-man rosters, all complete with graphics. We have it all. So let's start with the easy one. And it's special teams. So let's talk about it. Not that we need to really talk about it much, but it's the kicker, Cameron Dicker. It's the punter, J.K. Scott. Long snapper, Josh Harris. We don't need to review this too much, but this is the three.
Agreed.
Any notes?
Let's move on.
Yeah. No.
Okay, good.
Good
All
chat.
right.
Good chat, guys.
Good. All right. Good. I'm happy that we don't have to talk too much about it. All right. Now we move on to quarterbacks, and there are three on this list. It's changed since we did our, initial 90 that we were talking about. It's down to three now. It is Justin Herbert, Easton Stick, Luis Perez. Let's start talking about it. Craig, how you feeling about this group? How confident? How confident are you in this group?
Okay, so level of confidence in the first name, very high. Everything below it, that's where it gets tricky. Let's start with Easton Stick. We saw the performance today, more of the same, consistent inconsistent. There was some good, but for every good thing he does 2 to 3 things poorly. I know we're not going to delve too deeply in today, but ball placement, inability to progress through reads without like all of his mechanics breaking down. Aside from the really good throw to Fehoko on that near 80-yard TD, there weren't very many positives, which has kind of been the story of his preseason. So him playing the entire game was a bit shocking. I guess you want to give him an extensive look to either like prove himself worthy of keeping or just getting him as many game reps as possible in the event he has to step in at any point during the season. So there's that. Luis Perez was almost like he did not exist today. The fact that he did not play a single snap throws me for a bit of a loop, but I don't know, man. I think, and I know we're going to talk about our 53-man here, but until they figure something better than Stick, I think he's sticking around.
Jamie?
I don't have a whole lot of confidence in anybody not named Justin Herbert. Easton Stick was Easton Stick today without killing the guy and going into too much in depth. I mean, lots of bad throws. He had some bad luck with some drops that weren't his fault. I remember 3 like really solid NFL throws that I was like, oh, okay, that was a nice play. The Fehoko throw was a nice one. There was a nice 18-yard dime on the sidelines on a deep out to Jalen Gill, I believe. And there was, I think, a relatively long completion for like 16 yards on a 3rd down to Cornelius Johnson in a tight window. Those are like really the only 3 good throws of the day. Everything else was really up and down, mostly down. But I think, Harbaugh said earlier in the week, actually he said it, I think last Saturday, that Stick was going to play the whole game this week. So we knew that going in. And based on the way that they treated that game, it really looked to me like everybody that played that game was on the bubble, and they were going to have to earn their way onto the roster. And I think that's why Perez didn't play. I think he might have already earned his way on, and everybody else was fighting for the last couple spots, in my opinion.
So you have Herbert and Stick. Is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh,
Herbert
okay.
didn't play.
I mean, Herbert and Perez. excuse
I
me.
have Herbert and Perez. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think Stick did enough to earn his way onto the team based on the way the total body of work we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, but particularly how he played within this system the last 3 weeks. I listened to the end of the game on my way home from Ellie's cheerleading game, and I heard Money and Daniel Jeremiah say, well, Easton Stick has gotten better every game this preseason. That's bullshit. He has not. Stop trying to sell us that crap. But I just think there are things Luis Perez can do from a throwing standpoint, from an arm standpoint, that Stick can't do. And I think you need those things in your backup quarterback. I think there's a good chance when they're done with cuts, I think they have 2 quarterbacks and they're trolling the waiver wire and possibly the trade market for a third quarterback.
So quick question here.
Yeah.
Just want to throw this in here. Jamie, do you think one of the reasons why they were kind of propping Stick up is because potentially they know that he is sticking around, for lack of a better term?
No, I mean, I think they know him personally and they're trying to find positives in his performance. I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think he's out. He's probably not out there if he's a lock to make the roster. I think. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the only reason I said that was because Money was pushing really hard about the first round draft pick being an offensive lineman, particularly the one that we drafted, almost as if, he had been nudged, like he knew that was on the way. He was almost like unwavering about it. It was like someone who was speaking to something that they had inside knowledge of. So just by it coming from Money, it makes me wonder just a little bit.
Could be. I think the flip side to that argument, though, is Money was also pretty vocal this week on his podcast about Easton Stick is playing for his job at this point. So I don't know that he knew he could if he knew going in that he was playing for his job. I don't think there's any way he could have known as soon as the game was over that they were planning on keeping him. So I don't know.
Yeah, it contradicts it. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back and forth on Stick and Perez because my heart says that they should have kept Perez. And then I don't know, not seeing him on the field, I guess would be a way in which you'd protect your QB2, but it feels like a guy who came in here partway through training camp, got like limited work up into game number 2 of the preseason. And then this following week be like, he's a lock. That doesn't feel like a lot to cement yourself as definitely the QB2. So for me, I think it's still Easton Stick, but I think whoever it is, whether it's Perez or Stick, I think there's going to be another quarterback in that room. And then whoever does get selected as QB2, if it is Perez, they drop him down, let him be QB3 on the practice squad, and then kind of be in camp arm and maybe a little developmental piece. But I've got them keeping Herbert Stick. Jamie mentioned it. I mean, there was a handful of throws that were NFL throws today, but he played 4 full quarters against 3rd and 4th stringers today. And he just couldn't, outside of 2 really, really, really big splash plays, the one down the sideline to Fehoko, and then that, end around to Darius Davis, they're not scoring a touchdown again. I mean, they couldn't really move the ball much at all today. And that was mostly because of Easton Stick. So it just feels like they're going to keep Stick in my heart. I think I would like them to keep Perez, but I'm going with Stick and Herbert for my 2 quarterbacks. I don't see them keeping 3.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap this up, I thought there was like a 5 or 6 play stretch at the end of the first half that it was like a microcosm of the Easton Stick experience, and it was super frustrating. There was a deep ball down the left sideline to Rice that was overthrown. Then he drops back, stares down his initial target, and scrambles for a first down on 2nd down. Then he promptly throws one over and behind Rice on a deep in cut where Rice had no chance to make the play and it was almost picked. Then he tries to throw one down the right sideline to Cornelius Johnson, and he airmails it over him. And there was one where Johnson had, I don't know, 10 yards of separation between him and two defenders.
Yeah.
And they were saying on the radio he had to layer it in. Horseshit. That was like, gimme. Like he could have reached out and handed it to him, and he overthrew him like it was over his head by like 10 yards.
Yeah.
That is the Easton Stick experience. And if you take the splash plays out and you look at the total body of work, you're looking at a guy who completed less than 50% of his passes against third and fourth stringers. If he's fighting for his job going into the game, then how do you justify keeping him based on that performance? And yeah, there were some drops. He could have had some better luck in some areas, but total body, he just did not play well, and he hasn't played well.
No. And then another point that it came up in Discord is that there were talks about trade talks of Easton Stick early on in training camp. So I guess maybe this is showcasing Stick, maybe get a 7th rounder, 6th rounder, something like that out of him if you can. But either way, I don't think they're QB2s on the roster right now.
I agree. And I think they've been saying for years, well, we're not going to cut him because somebody would just sign him. Well, then trade him.
I know.
Then trade him. I mean, if there's that much interest in him, trade him to Philadelphia or trade him to TT in Oakland, whatever.
Yeah.
But get him off this roster because he can't play.
No,
Let somebody else live with that mistake.
I was gonna say, I think we're all arriving at the same conclusion, just taking different directions. Because I also don't believe that Easton Stick is a long-term QB2 for the team. I just think he makes the initial 53 until they figure out someone better to come along. I mean, whether it's cuts, whether it's through trades, because I heard that also that other teams were feeling around about potentially trading for him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean.
Stop feeling. Have him.
First, I don't know. Did they think it was a joke? Was it April Fool's? No. I mean, if so, then if people really wanted an opportunity at Easton Stick, I don't know what there is aside from him being Justin Herbert's guy that forces you to keep him around.
Yeah, Vegas has a huge quarterback problem. Let them figure out Stick and see if they can work them into that quarterback room.
Yeah, let him go home to the guy that was responsible for bringing him on the team in the first place.
Find Justin a new binky. Apparently, it doesn't take much to make him comfortable in the film room. So find him a new binky.
Yeah, this one's got stains all over it.
Yeah. We got dropped in the carpet.
Lots of wear and tear.
Yeah. Time for a new one. All right. So, but we both agree, or all three of us agree, it's going to be 2 quarterbacks. Whether it's going to be Stick or Perez, we will see. All right, now here comes a real. I thought this was going to be a lock, but Jamie went left, and I love it that he went with Perez. Craig and I go with Stick for quarterback 2, and then here's where some decisions have to be made because now we're going into the running back room, and right now on the roster it is Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal. All 3 did not play today, and then the bulk of these 3 got the playing time, which is Isaiah Spiller, Jarrett Patterson, and Elijah Dotson. Craig, I'm going to let you go ahead and start this off. Let's talk about these running backs.
So top 3 names are pretty much – no, go ahead.
Just going to say, should we play some solemn music for Isaiah
Yeah,
Spiller?
I know.
So, look, I'm accepting it.
Remember. Yeah, no, I was going to keep going. I was going to see into you.
Wait, you have to play the music bed very low. So, I mean, I'm accepting the dream is finally over, right? I get it. Like, the first 3 dudes absolutely making the squad, especially after Kamani Vidal did what he did last week. He wasn't going anywhere anyway. I know I saw that there was a report out there that he was potentially on the bubble. Don't know how much I believe that. But the Jarrett Patterson situation, so I have Jarrett Patterson making the roster over Isaiah Spiller. But my heart still wants Spiller, of course, on the team because I feel like he provides a different element in the running game that Patterson, I mean, when it comes to Patterson, he's a little redundant. Specifically when it comes to like a Vidal, he has a similar running style, but he's not as explosive. He's not as powerful. They are both decent in the passing game. I know Vidal didn't catch a ton of balls in college, but he flashed that ability just last week. And I don't love what Jarrett Patterson has to offer. With Spiller, at least, he's still a younger kid. We've seen him be able to exhibit a couple of abilities that they could potentially grow with. But just today, I mean, he didn't do himself any favors. Again, limited carries, but he wasn't running with any real conviction. He actually looked like he was attempting to be like too patient and waiting for creases to develop that could maybe he could cut back against. But that wasn't happening before the pursuit reached him. In that event, you need to realize that and instead get north and south and churn out whatever yardage you could. But that just wasn't the type of time he was on today, and he's probably going to pay for it with a roster spot. It was based on what we saw from Patterson this preseason and the way that they just kind of ushered him into their RB3 spot, it looked like it was going to happen anyway, but I think today pretty much solidified it. So the top, I was going to say 4 names, but Flip, Patterson, and Spiller, and then you probably have what they're going to roll with when we're talking about the final 53.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, it felt like Spiller and Patterson and Dotson were all fighting for that 4th running back spot today. And Spiller getting 3 carries and only getting a single yard does not help his cause, who we thought maybe was going to be that 4th running back, but it just feels like Patterson kind of ran away with it, who wasn't all that effective today, but outside of that 12-yard run today, felt like the most effective running back. When I guess that's not really saying much because all 3 of them weren't very good today, but I felt like Patterson was the guy. They've talked about him a lot in training camp, and with Edwards, Dobbins, and Vidal being locked in, it felt like today Patterson kind of closed that chapter on this running back group, and Spiller and Dotson don't make it. I think they're probably eligible for a practice squad spot. I think there's a stash possibility with these guys, but I think Patterson becomes the RB4 on the initial 53. So I've got them keeping Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal, and then Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah, so this is an area where I think there could be some like roster maneuvering, because I think we know Edwards, Dobbins, and Vidal are all pretty much locks to make this roster. And I think I agree with you guys. I think Patterson is the clear best RB4. But what I'm looking at here is if it comes down to like 2 guys for 1 spot, and you're looking at who do we have to keep who isn't going to make it through waivers, and who can we maybe cut and bring back later who we think will make it through waivers. Like, say, for example, if it comes down to, I don't know, Tremon Morris-Brash and a Jarrett Patterson, could we see them cut Patterson to keep Brash and then maybe try to sneak him on to the practice squad later and bring Patterson back? So I think that 4th running back spot is an area where we could see some maneuvering, some creative roster building. Also, the thing that kind of threw me off too was going into this game, he looked like he was a lock to make the roster. He's had more touches than Spiller and Dotson. He's a guy who they've been talking up all camp, all summer, and he played almost the whole game, which kind of surprised me for a guy who I thought was, basically walking into a roster spot. So that extended play today kind of makes me wonder if he's as much of a lock as we think. Maybe they trim to 3 and add a 4th later. I don't know, but I have them keeping him. I'm just kind of throwing some possibilities out there of how they might get creative with the roster.
Yeah, because even like Kevin's saying in the chat, like you don't want to risk cutting Patterson because somebody could offer him more money and he can go there. I don't think anybody's losing sleep over losing Jarrett Patterson, are they? I mean, it's Edwards. Yeah, it's Edwards, Dobbins, and Vidal. If those 3 are all injured, then at that point, you're not happy rolling with Patterson. I'm assuming you're getting somebody else at that point. So
yeah, and there's going to be a ton of running backs out there on the waiver wire to pick from. So if they let Patterson go and he winds up signing somewhere else, there's somebody else you can find. You might find a better option who maybe, I don't know, is a better receiver out of the backfield or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the other thing we have to keep in mind. Those first 2 names are no guarantee to be healthy throughout the season. I mean, I know that sounds very general, but specifically those 2 names. Gus Edwards was dealing with something throughout the offseason. I don't think we were ever informed on what that was. And we know J.K. Dobbins' story. So realistically, that RB4 could potentially end up being an RB3 or RB2, just kind of based on how things have shown themselves to be through history within these last few years. I'm going to give Gus Edwards a little bit more credit here. He only had like 1 major injury earlier in his career. He's been pretty available. But that J.K. Dobbins RB2 spot is no guarantee.
Yeah, but I agree, Jamie. I think this is absolutely a spot where you can kind of maneuver if you want to keep an extra guy that you feel like could make this roster. Keeping a fourth running back, even though they want to run the ball a lot, I mean, you could find another one later on just as easy. And then if you want to do one of those late cuts where you do want to keep a Morris Brash and then cut him on the second wave of cuts where teams have pretty much filled their rosters, so you can sneak him on the practice squad. That's also a possibility. All right, so we got the same four: Edwards, Dobbins, Vidal, and Patterson for running backs. So let's go to tight ends, which is a little bit different. Jamie, how are you feeling about this group?
So I think there are three guys who are pretty much a lock to make this roster, and they're probably not the three guys that most people think. Obviously, Hayden Hurst, he's going to be the primary receiving tight end. Will Dissly is going to be the primary blocking tight end and probably be like a safety blanket underneath as a receiving option. I think the third option, based on playing time today, is probably Stone Smart. Smart was not on the field much today. I only remember seeing him for a couple of snaps. He is probably the best pure athlete at tight end in this group, in my opinion. Obviously not the best blocker, but for an offense that relies on kind of developing tight ends, getting them open in the seams, getting them open in the middle of the field, creating run after catch opportunities, Smart is the guy who I think can do the most damage in a role like that if they're just looking for him to fill a specific role. And I think he can also fill in on special teams. I don't have Parham making this roster. He played almost the entire game today. I don't remember him getting a single target. I know he ran some routes, but it seemed like he was out there specifically to see if they could trust him as a blocker. And I don't know that he is the blocking option that my fourth tight end is. So I believe they're going to go with Hurst, Dissly, Smart, and Tucker Fisk, because Fisk is, in my opinion, the second best blocking tight end on the roster right now.
Craig?
Sorry, I was muted there.
Okay.
So as far as the tight end list goes, I look at it a bit differently. I have the same top three guys as Jamie, so Hurst, Dissly, and Smart, but I only have three tight ends initially because I don't know if we want to have this conversation now, but just kind of look at the way that they've been utilizing Jordan McFadden. And the way that they could move him on. He played some tight end, specifically blocking tight end, and not looking to really get him out in routes as a tight end, even though we saw him throw him a couple passes. He's going to be more of your blocker, but also your fullback. So he basically kills two birds, one stone. And now you've got your two receiving tight ends, but now you've also got your two blocking tight ends, and you save a roster spot as well. But I do think they really, really like Tucker Fisk. And if they do go that route, he would be the fourth tight end, but I also see a world where they want to get him on the practice squad, and they may do some maneuvering throughout the season where they activate four tight ends and go that route. But I think initially starting off for the 53, they probably roll with three out of the gate.
Okay, I've got them carrying four. I just think with the way in which they want to run the ball, I just don't see them being that light in the tight end room, especially when you have like just one. I mean, Dissly being the blocker, Hurst being more of the receiving tight end, and then Smart being kind of both and also some special teams value. But I have them keeping Donald Parham. I just feel like they need another receiving option in this room. And I don't think they have it much in Tucker Fisk, even though I do like Fisk and I would love him on the 53. But I feel like that's more of a practice squad spot for Fisk. Maybe one other guy, Benson flashed a little bit, Hines has flashed a little bit, maybe if you wanted to bring one of those guys back in the practice squad. But I've got these top four. And you can't depend on Donald Parham. Before this game and even going into the preseason, I felt like Parham was all but gone because you can't trust him to stay healthy. He's not much of a blocker, and as a receiver, he's been just fine. But it just feels like they need all the receiving options they can possibly get in this offense right now after, the turnover in the wide receiver room, the tight end group now. And Dissly's not much of a receiving option, though he can catch the ball. Smart is still, getting warmed up to the position. I just feel like they're going to need another receiving option. So I've got them keeping four, and that's Hurst, Dissly, Parham, and Smart. So we're all different.
Yeah, and I would love it if the announcers would stop calling Donald Parham a red zone nightmare.
Yeah,
Can
I
we
know.
stop that, please? It's
That's-
absurd. Let's stop that.
That's multiple times a game in this preseason. It's just sucks. All right, so moving on to another group they're going to have to make some pretty tough decisions on, and that's the wide receiver group. It is Joshua Palmer, Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston, DJ Chark, Darius Davis, Simi Fehoko, Brendan Rice, Cornelius Johnson, Jalen Johnson, Jalen Gill, Isaiah Wooden. And for me, it feels like, this is a 6-man group here. I don't think you want to carry 7, even though there are some guys here that you might have drafted that you wanted to keep. But I feel like my list is basically this left column. I've got Joshua Palmer, Lad McConkey, Quentin Johnston, DJ Chark, and then Darius Davis as locks. They're definitely the 5. I think then you can make a little argument for Fehoko, maybe Rice. But outside of that, Gill had some special teams value. Jalen Johnson dropped a pretty easy ball that hit him in the chest today. I think that hurt his chances. Isaiah Wooden hasn't got a lot of looks. But it feels like, I know you want to keep the guys you drafted, like Cornelius Johnson and Brendan Rice, but Johnson hasn't done enough this preseason, and Rice doesn't feel like he ever got a chance. In 3 games, I don't feel like he ever got anything thrown to him that was just an easy pitch and catch. Everything he had to work for. And there were so many balls behind him today. I just wanted him to get one good look. And then he got one down the sideline where he had to stretch and make a hard catch and come down with his feet, and he couldn't. And it was just like, give him a chance. Let's see if he's even worth it. And we never got it. And unfortunately for Rice, it feels like Fehoko was the Chargers' best wide receiver this preseason. He, led. He was most in yards in game 2, second most in yards in game 1. Of course, he had the big bomb today, led receivers today. It just feels like he's a guy. And they talked about how Harbaugh said in training camp that Simi Fehoko looks like a guy that belongs. And to me, that kind of seals it. So I've got them keeping 6, Palmer, McConkey, Johnston, Chark, Davis, Fehoko, which means both 7-round picks, Brendan Rice, Cornelius Johnson, do not make the initial 53.
Yeah, this is one where I went back and forth on this. I had a tough time because I believe that Simi Fehoko has earned a spot on this team, but there were players in other positions who also earned a spot on the team. And in a team that's going to run the ball as much as the Chargers are, or at least as much as they're going to try, I don't know that they necessarily need 6 receivers. I think they should carry 6 receivers. I've been saying that for a long time. I'm just looking at the numbers and things are getting tight. And I kept somebody who I did not think I would keep. Actually, I kept 2 guys I didn't think I would keep doing this exercise. So I have them keeping 5, which shocks me because I was dead set on keeping 6. You can certainly make an argument for keeping 6, and I would not argue with you at all. And I think Simi has earned a spot, but I think there are 2 other guys on defense who earned a spot as well, and who also provide some special teams value and might, I don't know, they might contribute a little bit more if they're on the roster. So I have them keeping Palmer, McConkey, Johnston, Chark, and Davis. Simi was one of my last 2 cuts, and it was a tough one. I kept trying to find a way to fit him on because I know he earned it. I couldn't make sense of it. There's one spot that I could have changed, but yeah, that's not. I'm at 5.
So I'm pretty much on the same wavelength with Garrett with this one. So whole left-hand side of the list, same names. As far as the bottom of the list for that 6th spot, I mean, Fehoko was the only one that apparently had any sort of rapport with Stick during the preseason. I don't get that, but it is what it is. And he just kept making play after play. The only wide receiver that apparently could, for whatever reason, he was able to adjust to Stick's poorly thrown balls. He seemed like he did it effortlessly too. So dude got really good at playing with a really bad quarterback. So that says a lot about him. This one's really rough as far as Brendan Rice is concerned, because I think the kid is a player. Stick wasn't doing him any favors, but he had the opportunity to make 2 catches. One would have been for a touchdown that granted, when we're talking about these 2 potential catches he could have made, had moderate to high levels of difficulty, but such is life when you're fighting to make the team as a late round draft pick. So I think what they're banking on is either Cornelius Johnson or Rice slipping through the cracks and getting at least one of them on the practice squad, probably preferably Rice. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast right now. And I don't know, with the performance that Fajoko's had this preseason, if you can just be okay with letting that walk. They may have something in him. And again, if he can do that with Stick, then give him a capable quarterback potentially, because I mean, he's wide receiver 6, so hopefully he doesn't see much of the field. But in the event that he does, you feel like you can be comfortable with them out there and producing.
All right, Jamie's got 5. Craig and I have the same 6. Let's go to the last group here on offense, and it is offensive line. It's a big one, so I'll just read these off. Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, Trey Pipkins, Joe Alter, your starters. Jamari Salyer, Jordan McFadden, Brendan Hymas, Alex Leatherwood, Foster Sorrell, Brent Lang, Carson Barnhart, Bucky Williams, Tyler McClellan, who went out today with looked like a pretty serious leg injury, and Willis Patrick. How many do you have them carrying, Jamie?
I have them carrying 9, and I went back and forth on this between 8 and 9, but I landed on 9, and obviously we know the top 5. The other 4 that I have them keeping are Salyer, McFadden, Hymas, and Searle. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is they seem to be very big on versatility, and we've seen that in the secondary. I think we've seen that on the offensive line. Salyer can play probably 4 out of the 5 positions. McFadden can probably play at least 3 out of the 5 positions on the offensive line. In a pinch, Hymas can probably play 3 of the positions on the offensive line. And Searle played left tackle, right guard, and right tackle at various points during the preseason and during camp. And Searle, I don't think would have played at all today had Tyler McClellan not gotten hurt. I think he only came in because McClellan got hurt and they didn't really have another tackle that they could put out there. So those are my 9. I just think that they have a pretty good group of 4 backups who can provide depth and versatility at various spots. And obviously you've got McFadden playing some fullback, playing some tight end. He gives them versatility at more than just offensive line. So that's where I am. I'm at 9.
Craig?
Same, 9. And I hate you, Jamie, for stealing virtually all my talking points. So, yeah, 9 names and pretty much all the same. You know what? The thing that I hate, though, is I liked how Willis Patrick performed during the preseason, but the problem is just no real versatility there. He's an interior offensive lineman, and he's very much so a power guy. Definitely move forward. As far as the rest of these names go, like, I'm not excited about a bunch of them, but the thing that keeps them around is the fact that they could, to some degree, play other positions. And you're going to need to have that maneuverability because guys can and will go down for certain periods of time. So if you're pretty much pigeonholed in one spot, then the chances of you making that squad aren't very high unless you're just very, very, very good at what you're doing. So hopefully they can sneak a guy like Willis Patrick onto the practice squad. But, you know, just seeing the name Foster Sorrell up there and feeling obligated to have to select them just based on the rest of the names and who can play what positions really hurts my soul because it kind of feels like a waste of a roster spot. But hey, while we're doing all this churning, maybe someone else they can go to the wire and pick up here after cuts go down and the Foster Sorrell experience ends relatively soon. But for the time being, the same 9 names. So Sean Slater, Joe Alt, Foster Sorrell, Zion, Trey Pipkins, Jordan McFadden, Jamari Salyer, Bradley Bozeman, and Brendan Hymas.
It's been like 3 seasons of them, and I don't even know if we know how to pronounce his name. Sorrell?
It doesn't matter. Hopefully we don't have too much longer.
It doesn't. No, no, just not anymore. Wow. But yeah, he feels like one of those bottom guys that would make the initial 53, but then get cut. Because I've got the same 9. But you know, it feels like Sorrell could be cut and left off this list just because of the versatility of like Salyer being able to play tackle and guard, McFadden being able to play some guard. They liked him at center. Brendan Hymas being able to play in the interior. Pipkins being able to play inside and out. Bozeman has played some guard in his career, but it just feels like with that versatility, that this might be a spot. But with as much as they want to run the ball, it just feels like they're going to keep 9 offensive linemen. And Sorrell can play tackle and guard, not very well, but he can do it. And that's what it's going to keep him as the 9th guy. But most importantly, Alex Leatherwood, get out of here. We don't have to see him anymore. And I think that's the most important part of this whole exercise, is that we don't have to see Alex Leatherwood get our good quarterback killed. Easton Stick got, had to eat a couple sacks today, but as long as it's not Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and I just wanted to tack on to what Craig said. It was hard for me to cut Willis Patrick too, because I thought he had a really good preseason. Guy who can play some tackle, looked really good at left guard, looked really, really good in the run game in particular, athletic, able to climb to the second level. There's a spot. I wish there was a spot for him. I just don't know that he did enough to unseat somebody like Cyril, which sounds really weird to say, but that's where we are.
Yeah. Patrick was one of my favorite undrafted rookie free agents, so it was really good to see him pan out. Hopefully, again, they are able to hold on to him on the practice squad, but I wouldn't be surprised if other teams took notice of what he did and he winds up elsewhere.
All right, before we move on to defense, we're going to go back to wide receiver real quick, because we got this question from Steven P., who says, let's say DJ misses time. Is he talking about Derwin missing time?
No, he's talking about DJ Chark.
Oh, Chark. Thank you. Woo! I got scared for a second. Okay, DJ Chark misses some time, and you guys have to pick from the right column, which is all the guys we had cut. Who do you pick?
That's
between Brendan Rice, Cornelius Johnson, Jalen Gill, and Isaiah Wooden.
It's Brendan Rice for me. Just give him a competent quarterback, and I think he's fine. That's my selection. I mean, outside of the fact that you can line him up inside and outside, he won't give you the straight line speed of a DJ Chark, but I think that, as far as the combination with the rest of the group, he'll give you production at the short and intermediate portions of the field, and you can give him opportunities to move the chains on third down. So I think he'd be productive with Herbert. So that would be my selection. And I trust his hands more than I do with Cornelius Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with either Rice or Johnson. I thought Johnson looked really good today. Made some really nice catches. One tough one in traffic to convert a third down. But from what I've seen, from clips that I've seen, it seems like Herbert really likes Rice when he's on the field. So that would probably be my first choice, even though I'd be hard-pressed to say, based on what we saw in the preseason, outside of his run blocking, that he earned it. But it seemed like he was much better in camp than he was in the preseason.
This is all Fajoko's fault.
Yeah. Why did he have to make plays?
Jeez. How couldn't you suck like everybody else?
Rice is my pick over Corn, who would be a close second, but I'm picking Brendan Rice. And a lot of people arguing with us in the chat about not keeping Brendan Rice. And this is from Blue Dream. If we're talking about just ceilings, there's no world in which Fajoko hasn't already exceeded his ceiling, as opposed to Brendan Rice, who hasn't even had the chance to show his floor. I feel part of that. I feel like there is a little bit of truth to that. I don't know that we've seen Fajoko's ceiling, but I think when you're building out your 53, if you're talking about a guy that you haven't even seen their floor yet, that's a guy you want to keep on your practice squad and develop before keeping him on your 53, who are supposed to be guys that are supposed to be ready to play right away. And today, right now, as of my eyes and all I could see from these last 3 games, and I'm not in camp every day, but from what I've seen, Fajoko seems more ready today to be on the football field than Brendan Rice does. And so that's why I've got Fajoko over Rice.
This would be a scenario where you're ignoring production, right? And so if the whole situation about what Harbaugh said is based on what he sees on the field and what guys are producing, then you can't overlook what Fajoko's put on tape. Now, granted, practice from, I was about to say Spiller, see, Freudian slip, from Rice has apparently been very good. And I don't think you ignore that, and also consider who he's been having to catch balls from. But still, you have to take into account that Fajoko's been able to do this with the same quarterback that was throwing to Brendan Rice. And I don't think we've seen the ceiling with Fajoko either. From an athletic profile, he's technically more athletic than Rice is. I'm not saying that I believe Semi Fajoko will ultimately be a better wide receiver than Brendan Rice. What I'm saying is right now, if they're judging it just by on-field performance, you can't just brush Fajoko's off to the side.
Yeah, and I think you have to consider too the special teams value, because you're looking at this wide receiver group, and Palmer, McConkey, Johnston, and Chark are not going to play special teams probably at all, and Davis is only going to return kicks. If you're going to carry 6 receivers, you really need to have. I mean, ideally, you've got 3 guys that are contributing on special teams. You really should have 2 at a minimum. And Fehoko right now is one of the best guys on the coverage teams. He showed up repeatedly in the preseason on coverage teams. You could put him back there to return in a pinch if you really needed to. And I think he might be a little bit more versatile in terms of playing outside, playing in the slot, being kind of like a Z and a Y combo, whereas Rice is really just an X. And I think the other thing too is, while he's been good in practice, Rice has looked really out of sync in the offense in the preseason. Not getting his head around to look for balls. Sometimes I'm not entirely sure he's running the correct route. Now, he's had a lot of balls thrown behind him. Not all of that is his fault. But he just hasn't looked very sharp in games against 3rd and 4th stringers. So that's a little bit concerning.
So we got asked this a couple times. This one specifically for Craig. This is from Rodney. But do you guys think that there's a chance that Rice clears waivers if he gets cut?
See, this is a rough one, because people get paid millions of dollars to evaluate these players and be right about it. I mean, he did slip all the way into the basically the end of the draft. Yep. So, maybe people don't see what a lot of us do, but I mean, I don't think it takes someone with an overly keen NFL eye to see that the kid can play. I don't think he clears waivers. I think someone picks him up, and it may even just be because of the bloodlines. Like, having that along with someone who's shown. One of the things that he's done really well that I've taken notice to is the way that he tracks the ball over his shoulders. He makes those catches routinely, where you've seen other players on this roster struggle with it. Even Fehoko, saw that at practice when we were out there a couple of weeks ago. So I think the kid has the potential to grow, and someone else has probably picked up on that. So if he were to be picked up by another team, the Chargers aren't able to get him onto the practice squad, I wouldn't be shocked. So if you're asking me, long story less long, I don't think he does. I think he gets picked up by another team.
I think he clears waivers. You're talking about a guy who was a handful of picks away from being an undrafted free agent. Last name notwithstanding, it doesn't seem like the league liked him a whole lot coming out. So, to me, if you're talking about hanging on to him because you're afraid he won't clear waivers as a 7th round pick, that's a lot like hanging on to Easton Stick because you're afraid somebody else is going to sign him. That's just
not
bad.
Fair, Jamie.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. You can't deal out of fear. You can't hang on to somebody because you're afraid somebody else might sign him. Either he earns the spot or he doesn't. And if Harbaugh's going out there saying we're going to pick the best 53 based on the guys who earn the spot, I don't really think right now that you can say Rice earned that spot over Fehoko if they do in fact keep 6 receivers. I don't think you can claim that. And you can talk about ceiling and floor and all that stuff. He hasn't done it on the field in games. And you really can't debate that.
Yeah, and I think that's why he ends up clearing waivers. I don't think he ends up getting picked. I know it might be a name, but he had no production in the preseason, and he was almost undrafted. And we had a pretty close conversation like this about Michael Bandy last offseason during cuts, that there's no way he's going to clear waivers. He went off during the preseason. He looked awesome and one of their best receivers in the preseason last year. He cleared waivers. Nobody even thought about touching him, and now is he even in the league anymore? He bounced around a couple teams last year, but it just feels like he didn't produce enough to warrant having to claim him off waivers.
I want you guys to be right. I want him to, I want him to be a Charger one way or the other. So hopefully it works out that way. I'm not debating whether or not he's technically earned his way onto it. I don't think he has over Fehoko in totality. So to pick him over Fehoko would seem a little weird and will make me question what it's being based off of. But again, I think there's probably a few teams out there that see talent and the ability to be developed and putting him in an appropriate system. And if he gets scooped up, I will not be shocked.
All right, let's move on to defense. We've done it. All right, we're going to start with the interior defensive line. Pretty long list here. Morgan Fox, Puna Ford, Atito Abonia, the new addition Tier Tart, Scott Matlock, Justin Aboigbe, Christopher Hinton, Gerard Clark, and CJ Okoye. Jamie?
To me, there are 5 guys on this list that are pretty much locks to make it, and that's Fox, Ford, Abonia, Tart, and Matlock. I don't think any of those guys are going anywhere. I think what this position group really comes down to at the end of the day is, are they comfortable enough with those 5 to not carry 6? If they want to carry 6, do they have 6 worth keeping? Based on what we saw not only during camp, but on the field in preseason. I don't think there's any chance Gerard Clark or CJ Okoye are the 6th defensive lineman. I would be rather surprised if Christopher Hinton was the 6th defensive lineman. Aboigbe was a 4th round pick. They invested some pretty serious third round pick, excuse me. They invested some pretty serious draft capital in him. I would be very, very surprised if he went anywhere short of maybe being traded, which seems unlikely. Even though he really didn't show much in the preseason. So I have them keeping 6, and that is Fox, Ford, Abonia, Tart, Matlock, and Aboigbe. I had a tough time with it because I don't think Aboigbe has strictly earned it. We haven't heard anything about him in camp, and he did very little, if anything, in the preseason. I think he had 1 TFL last week, and he might have had 1 this week. But other than that, he's been pretty invisible. So I think he makes it. I'm not really sure he earned it. And he's one of those guys that I think is squeezing a guy like Fehoko off the roster because he hasn't earned it, but he's going to stick because of his draft capital that they invested in him.
And you were right. It was 4th. Colson was the 3rd.
That's what I thought.
You were right. Go ahead, Craig.
So, yeah, pretty much same 6 as, 5 is locks, Tito being that extra. But same names, Fox, Aboigbe, Ford, Tart, Matlock, and Abonia. Why are these names so difficult to say today? Anyway, so yeah, as far as Atito goes, I saw some flashes here and there, but nothing that to me warrants his play as being significantly better than, say, a guy like even Gerard Clark, which I think has a little bit more upside on the interior. I don't know, man. I'm really happy that they signed Tier Tart to play next to Puna Ford and just kind of be in the mix with the rest of these guys because I feel a bit better about the prospects of this rotation going into the season. If you were telling me that Otito would be one of their, I guess, key cogs or someone that are looking to step up and have significant performance this year, I'd be extremely concerned. But in a rotation with the rest of these names, I think it'll be fine. I would love to see them potentially swap one of these names out, even if it's Otito, with another guy that may be his free agency that I think could be more of a performer as an interior disruptor alongside of Tier Tart and Puna Ford. But this is probably the crew that they're going to be rolling with. And for the most part, I'm okay with it. I like what I saw from Scott Matlock and flashes, even though he kind of disappeared here in the last week and a half. But yeah, draft capital and Aboigbe, which is a developmental player, but should help in the run game, and Morgan Fox, where he offers specifically on passing down. So not an exciting group, but I think they'll be serviceable. But I also would not be surprised to see at least one of these names swapped out. And I keep looking at Otitos, and I can't help but wonder if that's the guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this is another group that's ripe for somebody off the waivers or possibly a trade to come in and fill a spot and push somebody out. And based on, like I mentioned, the draft capital of the Aboigbe, Abonia, who was drafted by the previous group to fill a specific role, which is no longer part of this defense, he seems like an easy swap out if they decide to do that. I don't know what they will, but it's an area where I would keep an eye out for a possible move.
Yeah, I feel a little bit better with this group with Tier Tart than I did, a week or two ago. But I'm with you guys. It's the same 6. Fox, Ford, Abonia, Tart, Matlock are all locks. Seems like they're going to try to get Matlock involved in the offense. I'm curious how much we'll see of that. We know he caught some touchdown passes in college. He's been an eligible receiver every time he's been on the field on offense in those goal line packages. So that'll be interesting. And then just because of Boygby, was a 4th round pick, I feel like that kind of bought him some time. He's been a no-show this preseason, and we haven't heard much of anything from him in camp. Hinton is out. I feel like Gerard Clark's a practice squad guy who I thought Clark flashed a little bit this preseason. I liked some of his play this year so far in the first 3 games of the preseason, but it just feels like because of Boygby was drafted so high, they're going to end up keeping him, and they really are going to start rotating their defensive linemen in and out, and they're going to need to keep a 6th. So I think a Boygby becomes a 6th, and I'm with Craig. Tito has been a guy. He has never proven to be anything other than that yet. And there's been some rumblings of some good play in training camp. We haven't seen it in the preseason, but he's definitely, I feel like he's making this team to start. So same 6, Morgan Fox, Poona Ford, Tierra Tart, Tito Ogbonnia, Scott Matlock, Justin Boygby.
And keep in mind, they think they got a steal in Boygby because they saw him as a 2nd round pick.
Yeah,
so they got him 2 rounds later than where they would have taken him. So yeah, take that for what it's worth.
All right. Moving on to the edge. Jamie will kick us off here. The list is Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Thule, Bud Dupree, Chris Rumph, Tremon Morris, Brash, Ty Shelby, Andrew Farmer, Savion Jackson, and Chris Collins.
So I went into this preseason camp, whatever, thinking this was a pretty clear-cut 4-man group with Bosa, Mack, Thule, and Bud Dupree. There were some grumblings coming out a few weeks ago that the team was considering keeping 5 edge players and that Rumph might make it because of his special teams value, and they felt like he was progressing at defensive end, and then he hurt his foot again, and he's now out. Rumph, to me, is a guy who's probably going to wind up on the IR. So not an option for the roster, thankfully. He's not a guy they have to keep initially and then transfer over. They can just put him right on the IR and he's done. So that's what I would look for with him. And then in recent weeks, the question became, would they keep Tremon Morris Brash? He's been flashing in camp. Is he a guy that could stand out in the preseason and steal a 5th spot and force the team's hand? And all along, I kind of thought, no, there's no way they can afford to keep 5 edges with some of the other positions they need depth at. I don't think it's going to happen. But I think he earned it, to be perfectly honest. I could not put this roster together, the 53-man roster together, without having him on it, because I feel like he showed a lot as a pass rusher. He's flashed in the run game. We saw the great tipped interception today. He just consistently shows up, and that's what he's been doing in camp, consistently showing up. And I think he's been playing some special teams as well, so he could kind of slide into that role with Chris Rumph. So I've got them keeping 5, which surprises me. I didn't think I would go that route, but I've got them keeping Bosa, Mack, Thule, Bud Dupree, and Tremon Morris Brash was one of my last 2 in because he earned it.
Greg?
Same deal. It's 5 for me because Morris Brash has made it to where you can't not put him on this roster. I mean, we went into this season thinking that Chris Rumph was going to be shoehorned in just because, again, of the special teams ability. He looks like he put on a bit more mass this offseason, so there was a potential that he would be able to contribute in a pinch on the defensive side of the ball, but mainly would be because of the special teams chops. But Morris Brash has definitely popped. He's cooled off a bit in the past couple weeks as a rusher, but he turned in a pretty strong performance to cap off what was an impressive overall camp in preseason. So today, 3 tackles, a sack, a pass breakup, and a pick 6. So, I mean, on the pick 6, it was really impressive. Like, he drops into coverage and he finds himself smack dab in the middle of a passing lane. So it's a great play by him and also great defensive play call by Jesse Minter, because they clearly caught on to a tendency for that down and distance and put him in position to succeed. Well, then the question is, when you're put in that position, can you make a play? Not only did he make the play, he produced points. So everything that you needed to see from him during this preseason, you did, and this was just kind of the cherry on top. So I think in addition to the obvious top 4 names of Bosa, Mack, Thule, and Bud, you have to throw Morris Brash in there, and he's also a developmental player for the future, because there's a very real chance that this edge group looks very, very different next season. So you want to get guys like this on the roster now, develop them, and maybe you have an additional answer to the puzzle going into next season. You're still going to have to build off of that, but at least you have a really nice piece to help with it.
So at some point you have to start trimming at certain position groups. And for me, it was edge. I have Bosa, have Mack, have Thule, have Dupree, and I tried my hardest to keep Tremont Morris-Brash. I didn't. I ended up keeping Semi Fehoko with his special teams value over Tremont Morris-Brash, and the thinking that Chris Rumph makes the IR. They roll with 4 edges until Rumph comes back, and then they do some, shifting of the roster, and then hope that they can get Tremont Morris-Brash on the practice squad and sneak him through waivers. I think he earned a roster spot, and he should be on the 53, but he was literally my 54th guy. And so he was my last man out. I really tried to find a spot for him. His play was impressive, especially today. It was a great exclamation point to his play through his preseason and in camp. But as a numbers game, he just did not make it. So for me, I've got 4. Bosa, Mack, Thule, Dupree. I totally understand the idea of keeping Tremont, not only because he earned it, but also special teams value. And then a little bit of versatility if you wanted there too. But just feels to me like a 5th edge rusher when you're starting to get into those last guys didn't quite add up on my list. So I've only got 4. I did not keep Tremont Morris-Brash.
Let me throw a counterpoint out there for you, Garrett.
Okay.
Bosa's hardly practiced in 3 weeks. We know he's going to be hurt at some point this season. Mack is getting up there in age.
Mm-hmm.
Dupree has had his injury issues. So you're going into the season with a 4-man group with 3 guys who are on the wrong side of 30 who all have injury issues.
Yes.
And that doesn't worry you at all? It didn't make you feel like you needed to carry? That's why I carried him.
No, it absolutely scares me. I don't want to, but it just feels like at some position group has to be light. And it felt like I could get away with these 4 edge rushers and then add a extra lineman, extra wide receiver. That's just, it just feels like it's a spot that if an injury occurs, you hopefully have Tremont Morris-Brash on the practice squad, call him up and have him come back next Sunday.
G is banking on Ben Herbert making these guys harder to break.
I am. Yep. That's exactly. All right. Let's move on to linebacker. This is another interesting group here too. I think you can pretty much lock in the top 4 in this group. I feel like Perryman for sure, Henley, Colson are going to be in a 3-man rotation. Troy Dye has got a lot of hype this offseason. They like him not only on defense, but he's been a core special teamer throughout his career. They need guys on special teams, so I think Dye gets it. And then after that, it's interesting because Nick Neiman is another one of those bottom of the roster guys who's a core special teamer. And I thought Shane Lee flashed a lot this preseason. So I think you could start to make an argument a little bit for a Neiman or a Shane Lee, but I only went with 4 linebackers. And that is Perryman, Henley, Colson, Dye. I feel like Nick Neiman is a guy you can find anywhere, that end of the roster type core special teamer. I feel like it's a guy that can be easily replaced and one of my last guys out. And then Shane Lee, I feel like is a prime practice squad candidate. Jean Baptiste had a couple plays today. I didn't see a lot from Quarterman. I don't even know if Ginda played today. So outside of that, I've just got the 4, Perryman, Henley, Colson, and Dye.
I have them keeping 5, and I have them keeping the top 5 on the list. And I have them keeping 5 because Perriman and Colson are not going to play special teams. I don't know how much Henley will play special teams based on the fact that he's probably going to be seeing a lot more time on defense, especially early in the season as Colson is working his way back. I also kept 5 because Dye came from Minnesota when Ficken was there. I went into this game thinking maybe Lee could force Dye off the roster, but Dye didn't play a snap today. So I think he's a lock to make the roster. Neiman, although he's been banged up, he also did not play a single snap today. And I think he's a guy, especially in my scenario where Fehoko doesn't make it, I think he's a guy as a core special teamer that Ficken will pound the table for because he's basically built the special teams around Neiman in a lot of ways. So you lose Rump, who is a core special teamer. You lose Fehoko, who is a valuable special teamer. And I think Ficken pounds the table for Neiman. So I have them keeping those 5. I really wanted to find a way to keep Lee. And this is an area where I went in thinking maybe I'll keep 6 linebackers, but I couldn't do it. So I kept 5. Lee was one of those last guys out for me. Really wanted to keep him. I think he's great on the practice squad. Those last 3, maybe one of them makes the practice squad, maybe Jean-Baptiste. Genda did play. He's number 38. He was on the field in the second half for the most part today. Had 1 tackle for loss, I think. But those are my 5. I think all those guys are pretty much a lock.
Craig?
Hey.
Oh, did he freeze? Oh, okay.
Am I here? Okay.
Yeah.
Something went wonky just now. Okay, so for me, this was a weird one because I have them keeping 4, and I don't feel great about it because the 5th guy out, one of the last ones out, was Nick Neiman, and I don't really believe that that's going to happen. Tremont Morris-Brash was the guy that really made this rough for me, but I feel like he has to make it. But if he doesn't, I feel like it's going to be partially because of Nick Neiman and the special teams value. Jamie already spoke to this as far as like his relationship with Ficken and how Ficken views him as a core special teams guy. But he had that really good performance and was like the first or second game of the season.
It's the first week. Yep.
Yeah. So the guys put on some pretty good tape. He's a solid linebacker. He'll never be really, really good, but he's got the athletic chops to be good in space. He can chase and run. He can run and hit. He can catch guys sideline to sideline. But for the time being, I still have the 4. Like I said, I don't feel super confident about it. I think Neiman might actually make the 53. But for me, it's Perriman, Henley, Junior Colson, and Troy Dye. And again, of those 4, only Dye would be playing special teams, I believe. So that one was rough, and there wasn't a whole lot of confidence behind it. But we had to trim this thing down somehow, and Neiman ended up being on the outside looking in.
All right, let's move on to DBs here. And just for anybody on the stream, we added a new name to this cornerback group because we saw him playing some corner today. So it's Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, the rookies, Tarheeb Still, Cam Hart. We added JT Woods to this corner list to play some corner. Matt Hankins, Samari Walton, and Robert Kennedy. Craig?
Yeah, man. So good old JT Woods, man. He's like a insect. He just won't go away. Dude finds a way to stick around, and he does on this list as well. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 DBs. Is that corners? 1, 2, 3,
7 corners, 4 safeties.
Yep, there we go. So yeah, here's the list: Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Dean Leonard, Cam Hart, which had a weird day today, to say the least. It wasn't all bad, but dude has to get on that tackling sled immediately and figure out the fundamentals there and get that squared away. Jasir Taylor, Tarheeb Still, and JT Woods, because apparently JT Woods' skill set lends itself maybe a little bit more to playing boundary corner, where he has less space to have to operate in. He's got the straight line speed, and the dude was coming downhill and attacking in the running game, and also in pursuit and pass coverage. He wasn't showing any fear whatsoever. I think we've been talking about this since the very beginning. We saw the effort. The technique was just always very poor, and then asking him to have to maneuver in space made him seem like a liability. But the dude's got the height and the speed to potentially be an effective boundary corner. And if you're going to play with that type of effort, that'll fly. And I'm pretty sure that Harbaugh and company have paid attention to it, and they think they may have figured out where his niche is in year 3. So for me, Woods makes the end of the roster on the cornerback list, and they might actually have something there.
I've got the same 7. Yeah, it's that top 7. I've got Zont, Fulton, Taylor. You got Leonard. I've got both rookies, Still and Hart, and then I've got JT Woods playing some corner. I think with his versatility and hopefully some special teams chops as well, he ends up making the roster. I thought he was pretty impressive today. Matt Hankins had a nice pick today, but I mean, he's gotten burnt all throughout this preseason, so I don't think he makes the team. Robert Kennedy made a strong case for the practice squad in my mind. I would not keep him on the roster, but I think a guy that has enough that I think would be a practice squad stash. And then, you've got some versatility in a lot of this group, some that could play in, some that could play out. Hopefully the rookies can get worked in on special teams as well. Dean Leonard's been a special teamer for a while. Add JT Woods hopefully to that list, and I'm okay with this list so far. I don't love it, but I've got 7. So it's Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still, and then JT Woods.
So this is an interesting group because when we did our initial projections back in June or July, this was one of those groups that we all kind of agreed was maybe one of the worst position groups on the team, if not in the league.
Yes.
And now you're looking at this group with 11 guys on it, and you could make an argument for 7 to 8 of them making the team, which is kind of surprising. Did not see that coming at all. I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for putting these guys in a position to succeed and coaching them up, particularly with JT Woods, who looks like a completely different player after the 3 preseason games. The kid deserves just a mountain of credit for the way he's transformed his game and become more physical. He's taking better angles. He's in tight coverage at corner. And another callback here, when they drafted him, Garrett's guy told us that they saw him as potentially being able to play cornerback and that they thought Staley was the right one to coach him up. So now we see him playing some corner, getting coached up in that regard. So interesting little callback there. That was something we all laughed at the time, as I recall.
All it took was a new regime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Real coaches, apparently.
But same guy in the front office, same guy.
So, Garrett said a few position groups ago, you have to start trimming somewhere.
Yep.
And this was another area where I trimmed, and I didn't like it, but it's an area where I thought I had to trim. So I have them keeping 6 corners. I have them keeping Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, who, by the way, was absolutely phenomenal in the preseason and deserves a ton of credit for the improvements he's made in his game.
Absolutely.
I feel like we can say this about lots of these kids.
Yeah.
Even Hankins looked better at times in the preseason. So number 5 for me is Tarheeb Still. I think tipped by the fact that he didn't play at all today kind of suggests that he is going to be on the roster. I cut Cam Hart as a 6th round pick. I think he only played in 1 or 2 of the preseason games. I think 2. He flashed a couple times today, looked pretty good in coverage, missed a couple tackles. I think he had 1 PBU, but I'm just not sure he's done enough. And I think you really have to reward a guy like Woods for the preseason he had. And you have to carry at least 6 corners, especially if you're only going to carry 5 linebackers, because you've got to have guys who can tackle on special teams. And I don't think and you're not going to have, especially in my scenario, you're not going to have wide receivers who are on the coverage teams. So I kept Woods. I cut Hart. Hopefully Hart as a 6th round pick is someone they can sneak onto the practice squad. But Woods played outside corner. He played boundary corner today. He played free safety. He played single high. He was in 2 deep. Like Craig said, coming downhill and smacking people, made a bunch of really physical tackles. Also showed up on special teams, which is huge, making a couple tackles. So Woods is my last corner. He absolutely, positively earned it. Did everything that I'm sure they asked him to and more. Looked great. So those are my 6.
We were kind of complaining about Dean Leonard and JT Woods before preseason and how bad they've been and how they were probably on their way out. And they built up all this goodwill with the former regime. And then this new regime comes in and they're probably on their way out. And they have done nothing but prove themselves through this preseason. And they deserve a lot of credit. Guys that we were all, kind of looking in the rearview mirror at right now before preseason started. But now it looks like they could have a real role on this team, especially on special teams. And then, you're not so worried about them if they hit the field, if, injuries do occur.
This actually speaks exactly to what we complained about with the previous regime. Like when you give them like talent that's ready-made, ready to roll straight out of the wrapper day one, then everything looks great. Like you expect Joey Bosa and Derwin James to be really good. But then they go identify talent that may be raw and they couldn't develop it. And therein lied the problem because they couldn't ever build the back end of the roster. It was just very, very top heavy with guys that you expect to produce and not very many guys that would take a little bit of work. So, yeah, again, look at what great coaching does.
Yeah, it's amazing. And there's one guy on this list who made the roster for all of us who I'm struggling a little bit with, and that's Jasir Taylor. He
Mm-hmm.
was a guy who we went in saying he might be on his way out because he was drafted by the previous regime. He was a Staley guy. He really hasn't stood out. He hasn't done much. I still don't feel like he's done much. He's great on special teams, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a big reason why he makes the team. But I feel like he's been handed the starting nickel corner spot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like he's played particularly well in that role. He hasn't been very good in coverage. I know he looks great in practice, but he also knows the offense. When he's playing against teams where he doesn't know the offense, he tends to struggle. He's always in a trail position. He doesn't tackle that well, which is supposed to be one of his strengths. And unlike a lot of these guys who all play multiple positions, Jasir is really just a slot corner. I don't see him playing safety. I don't really think he can play outside for more than a few snaps at a time. It's just not his strength. So he's a guy who I would have liked to see on the field more. I think he should have been out there with the rest of the corners today, earning that final spot. I just don't feel like we've seen enough from him on the field on game day to say, yep, he's a lock. Put him out there. He should be the starting nickel corner, hands down, slam dunk. It's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just don't think it's that easy.
No. I mean, even the game from Tar Heel still, that's a moment it felt like in game 2 where it's like, oh yeah, he's ready. Bring him in. He's, we don't need to see any more of him. But yeah, we never saw much of Jasir Taylor. And Hart gets a little bit of grace just because of the draft pick, even though it was the 6th round pick, but his tackling today was terrible. His shoulder throws on multiple occasions was not good enough. And for a guy who's kind of on the bubble, it just felt like he should have put more on tape today. And he did make the team for me. I feel like they're going to need an extra DB because they're going to be rotating a lot. So he makes it for me, but I'm not super happy about it. And I do not think he played good today. All right, let's move on to safety. Here's our list. It's Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, Thomas Jefferson. Whoopsie. Thomas Jefferson, Tony Jefferson, AJ Finley.
He ain't that old.
Yeah, I know. He's old. He ain't that old. Akeem Dent, Thomas Harper, and Jalen Phillips. I think Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, and AJ Finley are in. I think they're pretty much locked in. They've talked a lot about a friend of the podcast, AJ Finley, throughout this preseason and throughout training camp. And the game that Tony Jefferson put on today, I think absolutely solidified his spot. Having 14 tackles, 2 interceptions, a sack, 2 pass defense, a tackle for a loss. I mean, he went ham today. And if anybody earned a 4th roster spot, even at his age, it feels like Tony Jefferson makes his roster, and I feel like he's the 4th safety in this group. Akeem Dent, I mean, outside of the interception we saw when we were at training camp together, didn't see a ton from him. I thought Thomas Harper has been really impressive this preseason, and another guy that I think could be in on the practice squad, but I don't think they would keep 5 because I kept an extra CB. So I've got them keeping 4, and that's that top 4. Derwin James, Alohi Gilman, Tony Jefferson, and AJ Finley.
This is another area where we disagree.
Okay.
I thought Tony Jefferson played great today. We have not seen much of him standing out in the preseason as a whole. He spent most of camp playing with the 3s, if I'm not mistaken. I think Thomas Harper was already in. Otherwise, he would have played today. And he did not play today. So you look at this group, Derwin's not going to play special teams. Gilman's not going to play special teams. I don't think Finley's going to play a whole lot of special teams because he's going to be on the field when Derwin's playing in the slot. So I think you need a safety who's going to play special teams. And I don't think you're putting 30-whatever-year-old Tony Jefferson on special teams. So I think Harper makes it. I think his ability to play both safety positions and play in the slot and contribute on special teams trumps Tony Jefferson's amazing preseason game today. But for me, it's just one moment in time for a guy who's been pretty quiet overall in camp in the preseason. I think you go with the younger guy, the more versatile guy, and the guy who's going to contribute on special teams.
I want to commend Jamie for being level-headed here because I 1,000% went prisoner of the moment, and I have Tony Jefferson actually leapfrogging Thomas Harper for that 4th safety spot, and I don't love it. because I like Thomas Harper, and I think what he put out there says that he should be a part of this roster. So if he does, I will not be shocked. I think I just got caught up in the fact that Tony Jefferson essentially like summoned the spirits of every great NFL safety, and like He-Man, remember how He-Man used to call upon like the power of a gray skull? Like
Yeah.
Tony Jefferson did that for 3 hours of football today. So he performed like a creative player in Madden. You guys already went through the stats. Garrett already said it all, but to have 14 tackles and then those 2 picks, and I think 11 of those tackles were solo. He was all over the place. He looked kind of like Derwin, which was really strange. Yeah, plus the forced fumble. He looked a lot like Derwin today. Is one performance from a guy who's on the wrong side of 30, and also been basically he's been a specter for the majority of the preseason. Is that one performance enough to put him on the team? Well, Derwin seems to trust him and want him around. That might mean something. Maybe Jim could care less about that. And in the event Thomas Harper sticks around, he has that relationship with Chris O'Leary also, because didn't Harper go to Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken?
He did.
So he has that relationship with Leary, and maybe Leary is the vote that pushes it over the top. So we'll see. But as of right now, I have it as Derwin, Alohi, AJ Finley, and Tony Jefferson. Again, I don't feel great about turning Tony Jefferson, but if he makes it, this game will probably be the reason why.
All right. So Jamie has Harper. Craig and I have Tony Jefferson, and he has the power. So let's move on to our last in and last out. So what we did is we took the 2 guys that, because it usually comes down to probably like 2 to 4 guys that kind of are in, and 2 or 4 guys that are out. So we took the top 2, like last 2 we put in and the last 2 we took out. So for Craig, let's talk about your last 2 in, last 2 out.
So this one's not as rough. I mean, Rice, of course, was probably the most difficult, but Donald Parham wasn't as difficult to get off of the list as I thought he would be initially. You have to consider the fact that, 6'8" with great athletic ability, decent speed, someone who can really threaten the seam. And apparently the NFL fancies him as this red zone threat, which has never been proven to this point, but he's never available, or not often enough. So with all of those tangibles, the fact of the matter is, if you can't have a guy that's available and he doesn't offer you much as a blocker either, when you have someone who's probably comparable as a receiver and Stone Smart and has the ability to continue to grow, he's a guy who hasn't played the position for a super long time, but he's growing into it. That one was an easier selection than what I thought it might be. Brendan Rice, we've kind of already been through this before. I just like him as a player. I think there's a lot of potential there, but with Simi Fehoko kind of doing what he did unexpectedly this offseason and through the preseason kind of pushes him off. Then when you look at the guys that were kind of the last in, Tremont Morris-Brash and JT Woods, it comes all down to performance throughout the preseason. We had written JT Woods off completely, and I think if he stayed at safety, he wouldn't be on the roster. But the fact that they moved him over to corner and maybe potentially found his niche because of that very linear play style that he has basically acquitted himself very well at the position, and that's something that you can work with. It's not every day that in the NFL you can find 6'2" plus corner that runs 4.3 and has the want to come downhill and be a striker in the run game. So that's something you can absolutely work with. And Tremont Morris-Brash just keeps showing up. And much like Tony Jefferson, the last impression that you have of him is him catching a pick as an edge player and returning it for 6 points. These are guys that can be difference makers on this roster, potentially. JT Woods, in some way, shape, or form, and even on special teams, can offer that, maybe. But again, he has a skill set that you can grow and potentially turn into someone on the defensive side of the ball. Tremont Morris-Brash may actually have a very good chance at playing this year, just kind of due to the age and attrition on the edge position. We know what happens with Joey Bosa virtually every year. Khalil Mack's a little bit older, but he's kind of been an Iron Man here recently. And, you've got some of the younger guys like Thule who are still growing and developing. And I just think Morris-Brash will find himself in the mix and also be a contributor on special teams. So that was my rationale behind these guys making it and the other 2 not.
All right, my last two in were Foster Sorrell and JT Woods. Sorrell makes it just because of all the manpower they want at the offensive line when they want to run the ball. Being able to play inside and out helped him get that last spot. And JT Woods, again, a guy like we've talked about, has really proven himself and looks like he has something at corner, and he's been really impressive. Trevon Morris Brash ended up being out on my list. I ended up trimming actually Tremont Morris Brash and Nick Neiman at the linebacker spot. I was kind of light on both edge and linebacker. They would have been my guys in if I didn't add some of these other guys. I guess you could have added Donald Parham as one of my last in as well, but I just felt like in my mind they needed another pass catcher at tight end, though I totally get the point on why you guys would cut him, and I'm not losing any sleep if they do cut him because as of right now, he's done nothing other than having a massive frame, which hopefully, if he is kept, this regime can maximize. So I've got Sorrell and Woods as my last two in, and then unfortunately, I've got Morris Brash out, and then Nick Neiman as a guy, as a core special teamer, I'm hoping to pick up elsewhere on my 53. Jamie?
So my last in were Tremont Morris Brash and JT Woods. The guys have already really talked about it. For me, Brash, he provides really important depth at a position group that's manned by three guys who are on the wrong side of 30 and who've dealt with a lot of injuries in their career. So I feel like you need that extra body. He can also contribute on special teams, provide some pass rush, flashed in coverage today. He's just a guy who I think they're going to want to hang on to. Even if he doesn't necessarily stick on the roster, I think he winds up making the initial 53, and like I mentioned earlier, there could be an opportunity to, use some roster maneuvering to stash him on the practice squad potentially once the practice squads are full. And Woods, for me, you're talking about a 6'2" corner who can run. He showed the ball skills in college. Now he's tackling. He's playing a physical brand of football. He looks really good in press. Just a guy who I think, like I said, he earned it. He did everything the coaches asked him to. He embraced playing a new position. He's shown that he's willing to be physical and tackle and make plays in the running game, all things that were knocks on him. He just looks like a different player right now. And with the athletic traits that he has and the physical traits that he has, it's just a guy that I think they kind of have to keep to see what else they can get out of him if they continue to develop him. Fehoko was a tough one. He initially was on my team, and then as I started moving pieces around, he was one of the guys that I cut to make room for, well, he was really the guy I cut to make room for Tremont Morris Brash. And then Stick, he initially was on the list, and as I started looking around, I realized that I didn't think he made it, and I felt like we needed to keep JT Woods. So it was kind of a 1-for-1 trade, Brash for Fehoko, Woods for Stick, and that's how I got those guys on the roster.
All right, Craig. Now it's down to our final 53. Here is Craig's initial 53. Any notes? Anything else? You're muted. But if there's anything else you want to add here, this is your guy.
No, man. It's just, again, there are a couple of names on here I didn't feel great about. Spoke to this already. Nick Neiman being one and Thomas Harper being the other. So if those guys are swapped out with a couple of other names, again, not going to be shocked. And in at least one instance, kind of sort of hoping it happens.
All right. This is my 53. A little light on edge rushers early on, a little light on linebacker. Feels like Rumph is probably a good bet to be on the IR. You might see DJ Chark there as well. So these lists could obviously flip because all three of us have Chark on our initial 53. But other than that, I feel like Tony Jefferson is a guy that while Harper has more upside and a guy I'd love to keep on the practice squad, just feels like a captain of the room that they might want to keep, a veteran they want to put on this roster. And just want to commend Dean Leonard and JT Woods again for their preseason. They looked good. We'll see when they play against NFL starters, but so far so good. And also Kamani Vidal, really impressive game too, and can't wait to see him in in-game action. Here is Jamie's 53.
I mean, I pretty much already covered it, but for me, I didn't think Stick did enough to keep his spot. Patterson, keep an eye on that fourth running back spot as a potential area for some roster maneuvering if they want to keep an extra player at another position and maybe add Patterson later, because I don't think he's a guy they necessarily have to keep or protect to be able to bring back later. Again, wanted to keep 6 wide receivers. Think they should keep 6 wide receivers. Hope they do keep 6 wide receivers. But just based on the way things worked out with guys like Brash and Woods making the roster, just didn't have room for that 6th receiver. And unfortunately, Simi is the guy who loses that spot, even though I do think he earned it. And then everything else is pretty much straightforward. Brash earned that spot. Neiman winds up being the 5th linebacker, primarily because of special teams value. I think Ficken and pounds a table for him. Woods absolutely earned that 6th corner spot. Hopefully he keeps building on the season he had. And then I know Tony Jefferson had a great game today, but I think Harper already did enough to make this team. And I think you go with the younger guy who's going to play special teams in a room of 3 guys who probably are not going to play a whole bunch of special teams.
Do you guys have any names? And this is just a question we're throwing out there. Is there any names you can think of that you would like if a team cuts anybody? Anybody have anything? The first one that comes to mind, somebody brought it up, I think last week or the week before, was Taylor Heineke. He's with the Falcons right now, but with Cousins and drafting Penix, they might not keep a 3rd. But I would love him as a QB too. I'd have a lot more confidence in him than either Perez or Stick.
Another guy that comes to mind is, in terms of quarterbacks, is maybe like a Tim Boyle, who's I think right now QB3 for the Rams, if I'm not mistaken. Strong arm, been around for a while. He can make some of those throws that Stick struggles with. But I would absolutely be looking. Jacoby Brissett's another one, potentially. I would absolutely be looking at quarterback. I think offensive line is an area where they might add from the waiver wire. Defensive line could be a position group where they do that as well. So those are the positions I would look out for.
I think we've all been laser focused on a replacement QB too. So Tyler Huntley is another name to throw out there as well. I believe he also has some experience in the system, so it kind of makes sense. And I can look at some other names. I'm sure I will, but my number one objective has been getting Easton Stick off of this roster.
Yeah, is Brissett? I thought he was locked in
with the Patriots, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Pats have actually, what's the kid's name from Tennessee? Joe, can't remember his last name. Milton's apparently been playing pretty well this preseason, and I don't think they were expecting him to develop this quickly. So you've got your 1st round QB, and you have another young one behind him, even though that might be a trading chip somewhere down the line, because I don't think you can keep both of those guys around long term. So who knows?
There was another name, and now I just thought Malik Willis was another one who might be on the
Titans
on his way out. Yeah, don't love him, but just another name I like more than Stick.
Yeah, I like quarterbacks who can throw the ball. Call me crazy.
Well, you're being a little selfish here, Jamie, because
can't have it all.
All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us for almost 90 minutes of 53-man talks. I appreciate you guys coming in on live. Make sure to join the Patreon. Jump in that Discord. We're all in there all the time. You'll see Jamie, Craig, and I more in there than on Twitter, but make sure you're following us over there as well. Love y'all. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.